for officially for real. All right, well, lots of people showed up this time. That feels good. Thanks for showing up, everyone. We got myself, Katura, we've got Finarfin, we've got Foe of Night, and we've got Stormborn Slade. Good to see you all here. So first, I suppose, we'll probably want to take a look at some of the things that we said we were going to do for the last meeting. I anticipate this will only take a little bit, and then for the rest of the recording, I pretty much want to go over all of the results of the survey that we ran, and see if we can glean any information out of that. So as for the follow-up items from last time, the thing I had said was that I was going to try and get the sealed rework and the collection rework out, and both of those are done. They're in. I'm very pleased to finally have that collection rework finished. It means that I can adjust people's awards. I can adjust, like for instance, we had a snafu the other day with the sealed league not handing out sealed stuff that it was supposed to. I was able to fix that manually because I could finally see the inside of people's collections. So yeah, I'm very happy that that's gone out. DMAS said that he's going to scan in his Race to Mountain Doom material, and he has once again forgotten to do that. But that's all right. We'll get that eventually. Make some progress on the Sauron Masterwork. Technically, that happened, but we it's not like majorly gaining any momentum right now. Nelson will work on the V1 sealed starters for sealed leagues. I don't see him here, but I think he's probably been mostly tied into making sure that the sealed gala that started on Thursday has been going off. So I don't know if he's made any major progress on that, but that's fine. And then just because we had such a bad time with the audio last time, I had to do some recording setups here, which I took care of off camera here. But okay, so that's that. Now I really just want to dig into this this big ol' survey. So my plan is to basically just go down question by question. I'll give some context about what I was thinking when asking the question, and I'll try to give my spin on what I think about the answer, see if I can interpret it. And if you guys have any thoughts, feel free to just jump in. I think that this is, I mean, rather than being structured, it's really just kind of going to be a review and see what we can glean, what information we can gather out of this to change what we're going to do or how we're going to do it. So first, a little bit of history on this. I did a survey right before the Players Council was first established, first trying to see what kind of actually, hang on one second. Let me close the door. I should have remembered to do that. There, hopefully the recording doesn't have a bunch of Pokemon show stuff in the background that I didn't think about. Anyway, so back in 2020, we ran a survey right before the Players Council was put together just to see what everybody's feelings on that topic were. We weren't even sure if there was going to be a lot of good response to it, and if we were going to establish a PC, we wanted to know what people's feelings on the subject were. So I still have those results. They're buried in here somewhere. One of these. We got about 75 responses on that, and then after we established the PC for the first year, I tried to run another one afterwards, but we got a pretty bad showing. Only got about 45 responses, and the quality of the responses was not quite anything that I felt was actually useful. But this one, I think, has surpassed both of them, both in the response that we have gotten, and I think because what's his name, one of the people on the server stepped in and had some very big suggestions, Eldarion, I think. And I think that it's much better for it. Anyway, so obviously we asked people for their Gemp username, and I did find it interesting that not everybody even put their Gemp username, even in the case where we know that they came from Gemp, because there's later a question about that. So only about a third of all people even put their username in there. So I thought that was, interesting. But I do think that this was offering those that promo pack, I think was a major factor in why people were willing to give the survey the time of day this time around. Not the only factor, but it was definitely a major factor, and it definitely contributed, as we'll see, to a bigger response from the Gemp community, where previously these responses have been limited mostly to the Facebook and other communities. So next question: how long have you been playing the Lord of the Rings TCG? This one was interesting to see change as time went on. The survey was first released on Facebook, which is mostly restricted to those collectors and um, people of that nature. Whereas on Gemp, of course, if they're on Gemp, they are playing the game. And so initially, the first 30 responses or so being purely from Facebook, a lot of them were down here in the mid range, with very few of them up here on the 9 or 10 height. So it was very interesting seeing that change over time. That a lot of the people on Gemp are people that have been there for a long time. What part of the Lord of the Rings TCG appeals to you the most? Playing the game. Once again, I think that was impacted greatly by having such a large response from Gemp. Obviously, they're not going to be on Gemp unless they're playing it. And then the actual collecting the game response was much, much smaller. On the previous ones that we had, this was actually something that had very surprised me on the very first survey that we did, that approximately half of all the respondents has said that they only focus on collecting the game. So my conclusion here, the fact that we have hardly any instances of that, tells me that the collectors simply didn't come out and respond much.
Question, perhaps
Sure.
we're missing a question, which is or possible answer, which is about the IP, because I feel like Lord of the Rings IP and the theme of it will appeal to a lot of people as well. You
Yep,
know, a lot
and
of
there
people.
was actually one person that answered that, that said that it was the IP that appealed to them the most. And so yeah, we probably should have included that, um, and that's something we should improve for next time.
Cool.
In fact, let me just make a section here. 11. What's the date? 12. And then zoom in so you guys can hear this. Oh shoot, the recording is in 1440p. Ah well, it'll just have to be ridiculously over resed again. So things to improve. We are going to add IP as things that is answer to what appeals about the game. Okay. Oh dear. Well, is that better? Is that easy for you guys to read when it's zoomed in like that?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, cool. Let's see. So this push this down a little bit. So if you play, how do you, oh, you know what? All that stuff I was saying about the length of time, I think I got that mixed up. I was thinking about the if you play, how do you play? Oh well, whatever. Anyway, if you do play, how do you play? Most of our respondents, as you can see here, 83% of them came from Gemp. There were a handful that came from LotR, which is the Polish platform, which is a Windows installation. I had posted the survey on that Discord as well. Here we have a response of 55% still play in person, so there is still a significant number of people, even with the fact that so many of them come from Gemp. At least half of them still were people that played physically. Physical cards over webcam. I'm surprised that there's any on this. In fact, this answer was really there because last year we were partnering with somebody who had a series of servers dedicated to different games playing over webcam, and the Lord of the Rings one got not a single response over the multiple months that we attempted to set that up. The fact that there were 5 ever, out of everybody that responded, I guess that's about the kind of response that it got. But anyway,
You have Gemp available. Why would you play with physical cards over a webcam?
you know what? There's some people that every time I bring that up, I ask people, why don't you play on Gemp at all? And they give me answers like, for instance, they much prefer the tactile usage of the cards. But I totally agree with you. To be honest, the one,
it's the shuffler.
It now some people might complain about that too. But
No, I might be able to speak a little bit to it. I don't know. I was actually one of the people that responded to over webcam. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Spell Table, but it is it's from the Magic of the Gathering community, and it's a glorified webcam portal that for playing Magic the Gathering, but you could easily play Lord of the Rings cards or whatnot there. I think there's some element of sitting down at the table with your friends and having that connection human to human that is missing from Gemp. So while I can go pick up a quick pickup game on Gemp, even when I'm playing with my friends, because we can't chat, or like maybe I guess we could hop into Discord and chat. I mean, that part seems to always be missing when playing on Gemp. Gemp is kind of quick pickup games, whereas webcam is sitting down beer and pretzel style with your friends, like at the kitchen table. It's as close to it as you can get, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but then
I get
of
that.
course there's still like playing with my foil cards, for example. Like that's a better experience on webcam than it is on Gemp. The Gemp foil system. I don't know.
Sucks.
It's all
No,
very
yeah,
marginal. All very marginal stuff, but there are benefits, I feel, to being able to play over webcam. And it was actually something I was talking about with that they remember the community who often streams, right? Pack openings. There's a lot of people like to go in there and watch the pack openings. And I was talking to him because I know he plays Magic about hopping on and playing spell table games and recording that and putting that up for people to watch and see if there's any interest in it. So, anyways.
Yeah, it definitely
Right.
exists, and I totally get the appeal that it's a kind of a social thing. Even though there is chat on Gemp, one of the things that I've wanted to do is try to figure out if there's a way to implement voice chat or something. Obviously, as an opt-in thing, because there are some jackasses out there, but there's definitely more that could be done to try and actually connect people. For a while, I was actually toying with the idea of whether or not it would be possible to like set up something programmatically so every time that a game started, it would actually spin up a channel here in Discord to kind of connect anybody that's actively playing to people that are not actively playing or even logged into Gemp. Unfortunately, I don't think it's really going to be feasible or even all that useful in the end of at the end of the day. But there's definitely some thought that we should put into how exactly to make it more of a social experience because that aspect is missing for the most part. Anyway, on a scale of 1 to 9, how much of your focus is on virtual play versus physical? And the reason that I say 1 to 9 instead of 1 to 10 is so that if you feel like you are exactly halfway, you can stick it at 5. And so, again, this is another one that is skewed by us asking on Gemp. Obviously, people that are going to spend their time on Gemp are going to, well, not to say that they can't play physically, but I think that most of the people that are on there don't bother with collections much. So we have a spike up here at 8 and 9, and then another one here at 5. And there's otherwise a decent spread of some people that and some people down here that don't bother with virtual stuff at all. On a scale of 1 to 9, how competitively would you say you've played the game? So this is one. There's not a whole lot of people that consider themselves only competitive, and I don't know how much of that is just because there's not much of a competitive scene. We don't have we haven't yet organized a World's Championships, for instance. We don't have regional tournaments or any sort of system like that to feed people into a system to eventually declare who is the best Lord of the Rings player ever this year. And that is something that I think that we need to try and figure out how to do. It's something that I don't have a lot of insight into. I don't really know what is entailed with that. Do you just play a bunch of leagues and then take people's points from leagues and somehow seed them into a tournament bracket, or do you need to have regional brackets to weed people out before you get up to the top 16, or you're like, what's involved? Like I don't know where to start on that.
Yeah, I've
But
got a bit of experience doing that for Game of Thrones, living card game, so I could have a think about it.
yeah, definitely think about that, and I'd like to pick your brain over that at some point, because we need to have a Worlds at some point. It's kind of dumb that we don't. Although I understand why we've been dragging our feet a little bit with so many other low hanging fruit that we've been able to pluck. But the other thing that I noticed on this, of course, is that there are more people that like the biggest bucket here are people that consider themselves more competitive than casual, but they're just not all the way up there. And I think that that's probably reasonable, especially when you consider the number of leagues and stuff that we have. It's probably just people really wanting to dig their teeth into it, but at the same time they know that if they try hard, they're going to lose tables because there are people out there that get mad when you come to the table with a serious strategy. They're like, oh, don't bring GLR here, don't bring discard decks here, don't bring this or that. Don't actually try to win. I just want to have fun. And so I think that they've been forced to temper themselves a little bit. But especially if we come up with some of the if we implement some of the ideas, besides worlds, like for instance the competitive or ladder aspect, like sort of tables that you could create that were strictly competitive, and leave your fun playing at the door because this is for figuring out who's the best kind of thing. I think that would help serve these people up here. But of course, there are a decent number of people that are down here in the lower half as well that are just here to play, to have fun. I think that we serve that already pretty well. We just basically have to make sure that it doesn't become only a competitive space, and ensure that there's still plenty of ways to play casually. And I think that the table descriptions helps for that a lot. If you really want to say, yeah, I'm just here to wind down, then that's just a way of communicating that. How often do you get to play? This is a new question. This was one of the ones suggested by a Dalaran, and so we see that I'm rather surprised by this, that over half of all the respondents play multiple times a week. For a very long time, my relationship with Lord of the Rings TCG was that I would swoop in, I would remember that this game existed. I would play fanatically for a month or so, and then the problems of the game would start to crop up again, and I would begin to realize, oh yeah, this is why I stopped playing in the first place. And then I would set it down, and then I would go and do something else for a year until the whole cycle started over again. But there is apparently a decent number of people that have just consistently, like, this is apparently the game that they play, and that's surprising to me. But that's because I don't sit in that bucket so much. 50% say they play about once a week, 16% say that they play about once a month, and then a whole bunch of people basically saying, yeah, I play less frequently than that.
I wanted to put once a fortnight for this.
Yeah. And and maybe I should have just stuck in once every 2 weeks.
It's fine.
But yeah. Once every 2 weeks option. What set formats do you enjoy playing? I think that this is going to reflect something that is not surprising to any of us. We have about 3/4 of the people saying that they enjoy playing Fellowship Block, about 2/3 say that they enjoy playing Movie Block, and then about 40% saying that they enjoy playing Expanded. Now that is much higher, I think, than the actual current split for those games. So if we look here at the number of casual games that are played, we're at about 45% Fellowship Block, 26% Movie, and then about 12% Expanded. And that fits along with my rule of thumb that Fellowship Block takes up half, Movie Block takes up 1/4, and Expanded takes up 15%. I mean, obviously those numbers fluctuate, but that it's still following approximately that. But we see here that there's actually a lot more people responding with Expanded than get to play that mode apparently. So that's interesting. The PC formats, they are not quite, they don't have quite the numbers, but they do exist. It looks like it's approximately proportional, taking about 1/3 off of the, PC Expanded has about half of the response of regular Expanded. And then for all of these other, or actually, no, sorry, this is is it the next question? I had some further analysis for one of these. So what set formats do you enjoy play? Oh, right. No, I took the what is your all-time favorite format or way to play. So let me jump to that one real quick. So this one, of course, was so this was just basically asking, okay, you enjoy playing these. What is your all-time? If you had to pick one, what's the one that appeals to you the most? And so here we see once again, at first there's no surprises. We have Fellowship at 30%, Movie was picked by 20%, Expanded by 10%, and then a variety of other answers. Sealed, In Person showing up here, 7.4%, and then people saying Constructed, Towers Standard, Draft Standard, Austrian showed up, Hobbit also showed up, although I think it's one of these smaller ones. So there's definitely a good number of people that like those oddball formats and less served formats. So that is something to keep in mind. What kind of deck building formats are you interested in playing? So this is talking about Constructed versus Sealed versus Draft. Lots of people on Constructed, of course. Everyone likes building their own decks. Sealed is, of course, up there. Draft is almost up there with Sealed, and I feel like we do need to do a little bit more Draft. It's just a little awkward, I think, in Gemp compared to Sealed. And then limited collections. So this is talking about, for instance, Finland Cassidy's proposal that we have a My Cards sort of collection deal that is reset every so often. So maybe once a year or something, we reset your collection, and then you go out and you build slowly towards it. And then those oddball formats, things like Highlander, Poor Man's, and other restricted construction that isn't really about what block the cards are from, but more about some other aspect. I did kind of laugh at this one, limited, but I don't like having my collection reset. Well, that just means you want to play constructed, but you want to play it slowly, which is exactly the situation that we're in Gemp. Anybody that has been around for too long has a bajillion gold stored up in their account, and playing those limited collection versions of my cards, you can basically just go ahead and buy anything you want. So it is essentially constructed for vets, which is the major problem with that concept. Anyway, what sort of strategies and cards do you enjoy playing with the most, and then what parts of the game do you dislike the most? These, I think, are something that we basically should take a look at while we're designing V cards, or perhaps while we're looking at things to errata. There weren't many patterns that I noticed. That this was basically just people ranting about the sorts of things that they enjoy. I do think that there are some things that show up a lot. People don't like broken cards. People don't like who is it, Sergeant Drano, that goes and plays with the 200 card deck. And stuff like that. But so we could reference this, but I don't think that there's really any patterns that really cropped up from those. And then just for fun, what other Decipher games do you still play or otherwise interact with? I was rather surprised to see almost half of responders say, or actually, okay, I didn't even realize this. Only 44 people responded out of 105. So a great many people don't play other Decipher games, apparently. Of the ones that did respond, Star Wars CCG is up there, and then Star Trek, of course. Wars, we have one dirty, rotten, stinking liar.
Crazy.
And then a lot of people saying no in one form or another. Although Young Jedi is down here. That is one that I did not include. What communities are you a part of? So this was me basically trying to get my finger on the pulse for where people are, and I don't think there's really any surprises here. The Facebook group is the largest, most active community at the moment, I believe. 3,000 members, a dozen posts a day. And then we have the Players Council Discord, the last Homely House forum. A lot of people still on it, but of course the activity has plummeted. We're lucky to get one post a week at that. And then the Lord of the Rings trading card game subreddit. A lot of people are on there, but for the most part, I think that this is basically just the same people that happen to be in these other communities. There's very few people that are on that subreddit that don't happen to also be in these other places. They very quickly funnel into the other communities once they do find their way in. A couple of mentions of MLotro again. Other than that, there's not really much to get from there. And then which community did you find this survey on? This was information that I thought was going to be useful in the future for trying to identify and actually I didn't finish the chart on that, it looks like, for trying to figure out where to post things like this survey. So hopefully that'll be insightful, but for the most part I don't think it'll change much. Now on to section 2. So that section 1 was basically just gathering up information on players, and we can definitely refer to this when we're trying to identify who our target audience and stuff is. But here now we get on to section 2 and 3. Section 2 is going to be primarily based around what the Players Council has done in the past, and then section 3 will be what you think the PC should be doing in the future. So here's our report card. Item 1, there were a few gaps, but the monthly Players Council weekend leagues have now been running consistently for some time. What do you think about this event? More than half say that it's doing great. There's another 12% that say that it could be improved. Very few people are not terribly impressed by it. And then there's another chunk of people that didn't know that it existed, and then I think there's basically just a bunch of people giving us input, and it's making me think I need to remove some of these other options. Yeah. Sometimes, especially when there's already going to be a feedback form that they can fill in, they just need to be aware that that's not the place to stick that feedback. During the leagues, members of the PC sometimes live stream matches. What do you think of that? So a third, of course, are saying there are streams, which is both a question of that even happens. It does very occasionally. Sometimes I sit down and stream on the PC's Twitch account that we have. But there is a pretty decent amount of people saying that they love it, and other people saying, well, they might be able to, they might want to catch it. And then there's all the people saying that these are all mostly just remixes of these other answers. This is something that I would like to see happen more often. I know that the guy that recently popped in, what's his name, Vigo, has expressed interest in trying to start up some regular streams. And if this sounds like anybody watching this video, if this sounds like something that you're interested in, we would love to support you. Like I said, we've got that Players Council account, and there's ways to hook up other accounts to it to kind of funnel people in to various other places. So if this is something you want to do, I do think that we need to do this more often, especially with Gemp and with the replay system. It seems like there ought to be a way not only to go in and play your own games or spectate live games, but we should be able to find interesting replays and then sit down and commentate on them. The PC did that a while ago, probably a year or more ago, where a bunch of us just sat down and we started spectating on games and commenting on cards that were played and speculating on people's strategies and stuff. And it was fun, like even just for us there. And I do think that it was insightful. And that was one of the first times that I ever saw Final Cry get played in the middle of a match, and it was amazing. But yeah, definitely think we need to see more of that. As prize incentives for weekend leagues, the PC offers custom Masterwork and Full Art cards as digital prizes. How much do these digital prizes appeal to you as prize options? So, no surprises, of course. We were offering people promos and Masterworks and Full Arts for filling out the survey. So the sort of person that appealed to them, they were going to come over here and respond. There is, however, a decent contingent of people that it just doesn't appeal to at all. I think that this is basically capturing that same paper-only kind of crowd, and then everybody in between. There's pretty much a spike at the top and the bottom, and then a little bit in the middle. People either really like it or don't care to one extent or another.
I suppose, for that one, it's asking about prizes for the weekend league. So those players that aren't bothered about the weekend leagues at all,
That's
aren't
true.
going to be bothered about the prizes.
That's true. I did, in fact, that did get primed a little bit too. I was kind of hoping just to see what people thought about those as prize options in general, but I guess that did, yeah, that may have biased it that way. Do you have any of the feedback regarding? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel for me, I just prefer the original cards. So if there's an alternate image card, I'm not too fussed. To be fair.
And it's it would be nice, I think, to be able to send out physical stuff. I personally can't be bothered. I got burned a little bit. The very first event that we ever ran had physical prizes, and it took months to get them out. There were only 3 prizes, right? It was only going out to 3 different people, but between the fact that we had to transfer them between members of the PC that actually had the prizes versus who was shipping them off, and then the fact that all 3 of the members that won, all of them happened to be in, like, not in the United States. There was one in the UK, there was one in Russia, and there was one in Poland, I think. The Russian one, we ended up giving him like a cash prize because at the time, with COVID restrictions, they weren't even delivering to Russia from the US. So yeah, I totally got burned, and I said, yeah, never again. I'm not doing this. But it would probably be nice to be able to have that kind of thing. I do think that would make the most sense to attach to the World Championship. I feel like that would be a good way of attracting people into that initiative. It makes a little bit less sense to me to have monthly prizes, especially just because it takes work and then you have to track a bunch of things over time, and I feel like that would quickly get bogged down with the amount of effort that it would take. But for one-offs, especially yearly stuff, I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. Digital prizes are good because you want people.
It takes me 2 seconds to issue them. Yep. And
brilliant stuff.
yeah.
I mean, one thing you could do if we ever had a tournament scene is, the regionals. The typical prize would be a buy into the World Championship, so you get a win round 1. That's pretty cheap to offer in the digital world.
Cool. Do you have any feedback regarding our monthly weekend leagues? So there were a couple of people talking about maybe we could have a draft or sealed one. Well, wish granted. We've got that sealed gala that's now going to be starting up, and we'll be doing that every month. Every month. Nelson already has like 20 different sealed formats all designed and figured out. So we're not going to see any repeats for a long time. It's basically going to be all kinds of new stuff. Another person talking about physical versions would be nice. Make a video explaining what it is and how it works. This is something I've been thinking about recently, is that we could really do with some more video tutorials for things. Gemp, the Gemp video tutorials are all obsolete because none of them use the new UI here. And so anybody that's looking down here looking for the deck builder is going to, have to go up and search and realize that it's been moved up here and stuff like that. That's actually something that I'll probably end up tackling at some point unless someone beats me to it. I think that relatively recently, and I mentioned this the other day, I started playing the online Pokemon TCG just on a whim because I'd gotten some of the cards from my kids just to see what the state of the game was. And the tutorials that they had were all chopped up into tiny little bits. They were 2 to 3 minutes long a piece, each one just going over a different aspect of the system, but all put together in a playlist. So if you were watching all in one big chunk, you basically got the same sort of experience, except that if there was, it occurred to me that if you change one of those things, like for instance where things are located in the UI, then you could just alter that one, 3-minute video without having to re-record everything. And I think that would definitely help us be able to, just put in as little work as needed instead of needing to put out these 2-hour videos or whatever.
On this note, too, one thought I had coming from the Magic community, I was actually kind of surprised to hear that the Pokemon was still using video tutorials. I don't know what it would take to, and or how involved it would be to build in like actual tutorials into the GIMP system that are, kind of like click through the kind of the very linear game state, right? Like so in Magic, that's kind of what they do is they have a series of click through, here's how to attack with your creature. They set up a little board state, and you have to physically click on the creature, and that turns it sideways, and they just kind of walk you through it. And I wonder if something like that would not only help users, grasp GIMP more as well as the game.
Right.
So something to consider, the next step beyond the video, if that's possible.
Yep, and that would definitely, I think, be the best case. I feel like it wouldn't be out of the question to just do a kind of a dummy board that's not actually like it looks the same, but it's not actually the game hall or whatever. It's just posting a bunch of images and you're kind of clicking through. I feel like that would be reasonably fast to set up. I do at some point want to be able to have simple AI or something, or even just a solitaire mode where you provide 2 decks and then you swap back and forth between yourself. And something like that would then kind of naturally also flow into having a tutorial mode, where the tutorial system would take over playing one side, and really kind of like you say, point out that you need to click on this area, you need to click on that area. Personally, I would wait for game tutorials like that until we finally gotten around to completely overhauling the UI for this, because that's one thing that I've already been burned on, is doing the tutorial for something that then got reworked. And since we've got limited manpower, that will probably be the most efficient way of setting that up. But in the meantime, however, I think that a video is probably the quickest and fastest thing for us to do, even if something changes. So long as we chop it up in small enough bits, then it's easy for us to update. I think that's probably the way forward for now, but I totally agree that eventually that we should have something more interactive as a tutorial.
Yeah, the AI sounds amazing. It's all in the deck building. So if you build a deck for the computer to play, where there's got to be decks out there that are just,
Straightforward.
you're always
Yeah.
straightforward. The shadow side, you just play every character. You always double move. You start in Fellowship, you have no more characters. You just play Fence and just keep pushing it. And they're probably terrible, but they would get people familiar.
And
with
it would
the,
also be, I think, very useful for people that are trying out their decks, especially if there's well-known, like, okay, here's the bot that always double moves. Here's the bot that never double moves. Here's the bot that
Yeah.
these different behavior types. I think my wife plays a lot on Dominion, and I'm pretty sure that the Dominion online bots have different behaviors, and so the community is well known that, okay, if this can at least beat Lord Raddington, then I have a deck. I have a strategy. Kind of thing. They don't build decks, or I mean, they literally build decks, but they have strategies rather, deck building strategies. But
Yeah.
it's same basic idea. Let's see. Another guy talking about stuff that's not constructed. Again, we've moved on to having those monthly sealed leagues. Hopefully that will keep going. I'm happy that those playing on Gemp have errata and promotional cards and leagues. I think it makes sense to go the digital route for continuing the legacy of this game. I just prefer in-person physical matches. Yeah, and that's so. I've mentioned the World Championship thing a little bit. During the pandemic, the Star Wars PC had their World Championships on Gemp. And in fact, I think they even put in some work to have a special type of game that couldn't be spectated. It could only be commentated on. So there was one person that was a spectator, and then they recorded it and commentated on it live, but other people couldn't see it except through the stream. So that way there wasn't any cheating going on. But there's a lot of people that talk about the physical aspect of the game, and I wonder how much does it make sense for us to have our World Championship as a digital event or as a physical event? Does it make sense to just have a physical event that's kind of its own separate thing? I don't know. It's hard for me to guess on this because I don't care about the cardboard side of the game.
Yeah, I think digital just makes so much sense now.
Mhm.
We're all used to it because of the pandemic. Magic going that way. Digital
Yeah.
just makes so much more sense, and maybe just people that want to play physically. Something the local metas have got to do and promote themselves.
Mhm. And while there may be a lot of individual people that like to play physically, I highly doubt that the number of games that they play even comes close to how much gets played on Gemp every month. This isn't even the events. This is purely for casual games. So any of the games that are happening in events are not being tallied here. So we're probably not quite 10,000 games a month, but somewhere around there, which is that's a lot. That's a big part of what is currently active. So it only makes sense to serve that. At the same time, though, there have been a lot of people that are a little disappointed at the fact that we don't have a lot of physical support. So there are some bones we can throw them. Anyway, in December of last year, we began a public playtest of Shadow of the Past, set V1, and in August we formally released it. How would you rate that set? And then I have a link over here to the wiki where people can look through all the games. So we have the highest response being here at 5, and then with a decent cluster over here at the 7 and 8 range. So definitely not perfect. There were definitely some things I think that we could have done differently. Now, just to sort of sanity check these responses that were up here, I also asked, have you created decks in Gemp with set V1 cards and played matches with them? Which tells us that about a quarter of people have done it for several games, and about 12% of people said that they did it once or twice, and then some people spectated, which means that the rest of these people, they either had no idea that it existed, or they browsed the cards and then never actually played it. So this tells me one of two things. I'm not sure which way to interpret this as. Either they took one look at the cards and were so I don't know, not enthused by them that they never went and played, or they are dirty rotten scoundrels that aren't even willing to try something out. So I'm not quite, it might actually be a mix of that, but
To give an example from Star Trek First Edition, there's definitely if you look at the forums, almost as polarized as a community. There's the people that love physical cards, they want to play with the physical cards, the traditional format. And even though you've got this amazing website where you can print off these new cards, those type of people are not interested in it. And then you've got the players that have been playing for a long time, and they're all about their new sets and about new cards. So it's definitely definitely two different types of groups.
yeah,
In my
I've
community, at
definitely
least.
been looking at some of those conversations, and there is a big split in their community over
Mm,
whether
indeed.
their CC, their continuing committee is doing what people want. It's definitely much more controversial than it has been here. But I mean, I think that this is kind of outlining that sort of controversy. Eventually, I feel like there probably will be a camp that prefers to not touch it at all. And in fact, actually, there is a whole. So there's two different Star Wars CCG discords. One of them that is the PCs, and then the other one of which is a book club where they don't touch any of the virtual cards at all, and they arrange their own community-driven leagues and events that only use Decipher cards. And it's been very interesting seeing that, yeah, there's just a lot of, curmudgeons that aren't going to ever get with the times, and that's fine. We've already committed to making sure that the old Decipher formats will always be available, so those people are already served by default. So then it just becomes a matter of serving the people that do want more stuff.
And another addition, if you think about it, people who got into the game during the pandemic, they would have started on Fellowship, but they might not have even got to the end of movies yet. I play with my group and we've got to the end of set 6.
And
So
this
we're
is,
not even thinking of virtual sets yet, but I'm sure we'll get there
yeah,
if we keep playing.
and that's actually something that has been on my mind too. If you grew up with the game, then or if you were an adult by then, but if you were there while the game was live, then there was a natural progression of what sets were physically released, and as a new set was handed out, then you would be able to very slowly work your way down that path. But right now there are very big jumps that you have to be able to take. You start with Fellowship block, and 3 sets is okay. It's not totally overwhelming, but if you want to jump from Fellowship to movie, you now have to take 10 sets into account. You go from a 500 card pool to like a 1500 card pool.
Mm.
That's a fairly big jump, especially
And the
when
rules,
the rules are
rule
different.
set changes.
New mechanics, new everything. If there's one thing that I've gathered from that book club Discord, it's that so they actually regularly go through a big cycle of events that basically recreate the re-release of each set. So they'll start with a Fellowship block equivalent, and then they start with Premiere, then they move on to Empire Strikes Back, and then they progress that way. And I think that we're probably going to have to think about trying to have some sort of event that follows that kind of thing. Call it like a Lord of the Rings University or something that allows you to jump in and slowly work your way through all the sets so that you get exposed to all of them both in isolation and then also as the standard equivalent that has everything up to that point, and really gives you a chance to learn the game, because the jump is even worse for expanded, because you triple the amount of cards that you're dealing and then you double it again for expanded. And that's just, I understand why there are people that enjoy expanded but can't get to play it. Not only does it have a bad reputation for all of the broken cards and so forth, but it's just completely opaque to new players that want to get involved. So yeah, that would definitely be something to think about. As for specific feedback here on the V1 sets, we can take a look at some of these. Release V cards on paper like Star Wars TCG. Well, because of this specific response and some of the other people that said stuff, I finally bit the bullet and pulled over the Star Wars TCG's V kit here. So now we do in fact have a tool for putting together PDFs, custom PDFs. So yeah, that's one thing that has already happened because of people complaining on the survey. So thank you for your complaints.
Can you print off the original cards as well?
So I haven't put that into this yet. I only put in the V cards and the Players Council Errata because there was no other solution for that. If you wanted to get these printed. However, I do just need to sit down and rename all the cards and write a script that will generate this. All of these were done by hand. I just bit the bullet and did it because there was only 100 cards or so. But that's not going to be tenable for the 3,500 cards that are in Deciphers. So I just need to sit down and do the work to add it to this same tool. But yeah, that's it on the docket. I'll get around to that at some point. It's just a little bit of a tedium. Anyway,
Are there plans to also consider like releasing the full arts and the promo cards essentially that we've done in that tool as well?
I'm torn on
Or-
this because on the one hand, people obviously really like the full arts, and I mean we have a publicly posted Google Drive here that has all of the releases, that has all of the promos we've ever released in full huge
Right.
huge res. And so people, Andrew View in particular, who has taken this and printed them out and had fun with it. On the other hand, it seems to me that if we're ever going to end up releasing physical promos, that this is the sort of thing we would end up doing. So I'm torn on whether or not I should make that easier, whether or not we would end up not quite shooting ourselves in the foot, but something
Gotcha.
similar to that in the future. So, but I mean, I'm open to it, especially if people think that it's not that big a deal. But
No, that's definitely a consideration I hadn't thought of. It was just a curiosity. But I mean, like you said, the access is there. Maybe not well publicized or whatnot, because I'm sure there's still people that ask about it every other month or whatnot as Andrew releases new cards. I mean, it's there, but if not making it so easy, kind of won't devalue the promos in the future. If
right.
we do go that physical route. So yeah.
Okay, looking forward to future V sets. We need to find a way to entice people to slowly learn the cards. Okay, well, I've already talked about this. Yeah, at some point we need to try and do that build upon thing. Truly love the new Boromir. Interesting ideas, nice picks for the cards. Can't wait for more. Mixed feelings. I really like the pictures and the thematic idea of them. Lots of them throw me out of immersion, though. Some cards feel like they don't fit to the rest of the Fellowship block cards. They have attributes or wording of later sets. Gimli, Naughty Nugget, for instance.
Naughty Nalgrim. Why did we not call him Naughty Nalgrim?
Sitting right there in the face.
Missed opportunity.
So actually, this is something that kind of goes over something that I talked about before that we need to handle at some point. There were some intentional wording changes that we specifically adopted. In particular, the ones that the two that I'm thinking of are that we utilized the term item, which is specifically defined as a synonym of possession or artifact. Item is not a Decipher term. That is something that we came up with just because we had so many of these cards that were dealing with possession or artifact. That I was like, okay, let's narrow this down because that's kind of dumb. And there are existing cards that could use it, like Durin, who has that same possession or artifact wording. We could easily change that to item. And then the other major wording thing was here. So, for instance, I believe that the Lorien Throne Room. Each time a companion exerts here, you may exert an elven ally to heal that companion. And so the intent was that here was a synonym of at Lorien Throne Room, because trying to fit all that in, sites do not have much game text at all. And so having a way of restricting it just to that one site so that you can't copy it with Eruviel or whoever, we needed something simpler. But neither of those are really talked about anywhere. And one of the things that we need to do at some point is that we need to actually be cultivating our own Players Council rulebook. In my head, I've been calling it the Comprehensive Rules 5.0. We have this 4.1 on the wiki, which is my attempt to put all of the Comprehensive Rules 4.0 and all of the current rulings documents and all of the rulings that they made for specific cards that they took out of one of those two documents. Things which are not they've not been made obsolete. It's just that because Standard moved away from those cards weren't legal in Standard. So why were they wasting all this time printing rulings for cards that aren't legal? And so basically, at some point, we just need someone to take this document, fork it, and say this is now the Players Council document 5.0. Let's add in entries like here and an item, and honestly clean it up. We don't need two major sections like this. We have most of this document is built up on this explanation tutorial starter deck thing that does not need to be quite so big. But that would definitely address the sort of thing that he's talking about here. We actually have, think about it, there is, what did I do with it? There's a document that I threw together for, here it is. So the intent was that we would have a, our own current rulings document that was formatted to look very similarly to the old one. And so this was put together for the very, very first Errata release. And so it defined what the different PC Fellowship, PC Movie, PC Expanded formats were, and then specified the errata in the format that Decipher themselves would release it as. And so that would be nice to have, just to be able to throw at people and say, oh yeah, here's all the differences. It even looks familiar. if you're into the old Decipher stuff. Anyway, so back to V1. I think you guys are on the right track with these cards. It has some cool cards. Many of these cards seem underpowered. That
coming in on that one, that was a really interesting feedback for me as the guy that designed it, because I totally agreed. Like I think we were so, I think me especially, I was so worried about making OP cards. I ended up being too cautious.
and honestly,
one.
I prefer that as a failing, as an error. Because it would have been very, very easy for us to just release a bunch of way OP stuff and that dominated the various metas. And I'm glad that we haven't done that. Even though in Fellowship block you see a lot of Vengeful Nogrim used, you see a lot of that Boromir being used. There are some cards that get
Now
used a
pops
lot,
up.
but they're not dominating, and that's fine. I feel like that is about what we should be aiming for. Now,
I do
underpowered,
think that because of that, we ended up making quite a few cards that just weren't exciting at all. And
yes.
I think with
think that
V2, what I'd like to do is be slightly more ambitious.
yeah,
See, I don't want to make crazy stuff that just wrecks the meta. I want to make things that people are excited to use, to put in a deck. I learned one of the biggest learning curves of V1 was that the make a card that is good enough for people to want to use instead of stuff that already exists isn't overpowered. Gap is very small.
yeah.
Sweet spot is so hard to hit. It's really, really small gap between those two things. But I would like to more on the ambitious side and the exciting side. And if we have to pull some cards back, we have to do that. But I would prefer that, I think, with V2, other than be overcautious again, because I think a lot of people looked at V1 and thought, yeah, there are some nice things, but there's a lot of things here that are just not very exciting at all and will never get used.
And I think that we've earned that now, especially now that we've shown that, yeah, we're not just throwing out any random ideas. That, yeah, okay, well, we made an error in one direction. Now it's okay if we make the error in the other direction. I think that this aspect in particular is because of two different kinds of mistakes. One is what you've already mentioned, trying very, very hard to make sure that it's not OP and it ended up being underpowered. The other thing I think is that we tried to make sure that there was a quota for every culture. So we were like, okay, yeah, we've got to have 5 to 6 cards for every single culture, and sometimes we just didn't have ideas for those cultures, and so they ended up just having nothing cards that don't actually help all that much. And so for V2, I think focusing on having more impactful, more powerful cards is a good thing, and then I think also we should just pare it down and only put out our best.
That's literally what, I don't know if you guys have noticed what I've been doing with the draft for each culture is I've put out a lot of cards for V2. Basically, the intention of that is that I'm literally just going to throw out loads of ideas, and then we'll just pick the ones that work.
Yeah.
The ones that are good. And we won't worry whether one culture has a lot more than another, particularly because we're basing it on the 2 towers. So, of course, some cultures are going to have a lot more. Isengard is going to have a lot of cards. Dwarves are not going to have many cards, and so on. But also, just putting out the cards that work. So those draft heads, eventually we'll go through them and we'll literally just say, right, these 3 are good, the other 3, and so on.
Yeah. And if it ends up just being a Rohan Isengard, almost closer to a pack than a set, like I'm okay with that. Let's see. Largely, I see it as a positive. I wish I was around more, established more to help flesh out the cards and strats more. Personally, I love that a deck like Hobbit Hospital exists in the format. Would love to see other mono Fellowship cultures become viable as well. I think that that's obviously more specific to Fellowship or Fellowship of the Ring. With movie and so forth, mono becomes much more palatable. But yeah, hopefully a printable PDF will be made available. Wish granted. Poof, we've already done that. You should include cards deprecated from Decipher, for example, the Nazgul OW10. So this is an interesting thing to bring up. But so this is talking specifically about, so he says Decipher, but this was actually a Worlds Apart thing. Is that we have a series of these cards that images and stuff are already put together, So he's talking specifically about this card, the Nazgul. Obviously, I don't think the guy is suggesting that we bring back the Triumph and Menace stuff, but there are cards that we could blank out and recreate, just with that thematic concept, I think. And some of these are basically begging to be redone, especially Stormcrow. I used to be so mad about the fact that Gandalf Stormcrow was a blank card of all things. What a waste of a subtitle. But yeah, we're definitely in a position that we could take some of these and use that as fodder. These do exist. That's what 30, not quite 30, because these are all reprints of existing cards.
I think the V2 Gandalf that's designed is called Stormcrow, actually.
Hey, well, there we go. Maybe we
I
could.
decided that one didn't count, and that it was okay to use the subtitle.
Why did they use
I don't like that
Stormcrow
it's
and
a
then?
Fellowship of the Ring picture.
Yeah. Why did they use a Gandalf the Grey for
Makes no
Stormcrow?
sense.
Yeah, whatever. But still, good feedback. We can definitely do that. More, all right, like that feedback. Might be that I'm too lazy or too old, but I did not think about that much. Yeah, well, sorry. We need some more new sets, and I know that some of these people, I believe, mentioned that they're from Star Trek, where they have 30 V sets already. Star Wars is a little harder to count because they keep resetting themselves back to 0. But yeah, there's definitely no limit. I think we could go really hard on this eventually. A good start, I agree. Slow growing the game, so I've not made it through all the original cards yet, and that's where that we need to come up with a track to teach people the game over time. The cards are too complicated. They have way too much game text. It would be easier for people to jump in if they were more simple. So this is actually something that we warred over a little bit while designing the cards, and I agree with the idea that simple ideas are fine. Obviously, simple ideas are easier to grasp, but at the same time, Decipher picked most of that low-hanging fruit.
That's exactly what I was about to say. All the simple ideas are done.
Yeah,
if you want to do new things have to be complicated at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I can release an orc that just has 8, 4, and damage +1 or something, but what's I mean, I do appreciate the sentiment. I mean, some of them, like the crows, for instance, have text that fills up the entire box just to get him to fit.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I understand that
some of them were way too wordy.
Yeah, but sometimes, just from a ruling perspective, you have to put out some words just to be able to make the concept work. And I mean, we had some that were short, not necessarily, and relatively simple. So Ringwraith and Twilight is actually one that started out, I think, with almost no game text.
Yeah, it was just literally just the strength +1 wound of the ring bearer. That was all.
Yeah, and it wasn't until someone pointed out that, hey, the equivalent, the non-Twilight generic Nazgul is fierce, and I was like, oh well, crap. No wonder it feels weaker. Well, we need to give it a way to give it fierce. And I guess we could have just started out fierce, but that would have been quite a break because none of the other Twilight Nazgul are fierce by default. Interesting, but I haven't had time to really use them. Star Trek player that appreciates all the work the PC puts in virtual cards and routers to keep the game fresh. I think the LotR actually needs more of this type of virtual expansion to keep the game fresh. I agree. It's just going to take time. I thought overall there were some great additions that allowed previously unused strategies to have a better chance. The dwarf-centric decks, for example, though some seem a little ineffective to use competitively, but looked fun, like crows. Crows are definitely a solution in search of a problem. But
yeah.
But I mean, it kind of bugged me that the Kerbane had almost no representation in the original game. They have a little bit.
Well, the crows are like the last vestiges of what I inherited basically when I started.
That's true. Yeah, we did start with the original set that had been put together
worked
by
on a bunch of crow stuff.
Yeah.
When I was first starting V1, I was just gonna carry over all the stuff that had already been worked on, and eventually it all kind of got filtered out. But the crows kind of stuck around.
And part of that was me. I couldn't stand giving them up. But yeah.
It was part of what we were doing. Yeah, we wanted to do stuff that hadn't been done from the films, and that was the crows. So I'm glad that we did them. Didn't quite nail them like we wanted.
is there an explanation for the existence of each of these cards? I mean, I'd like to read such a thing, just never stepped into it. We definitely have something for the errata. We have a big old page that goes line by line, and on each individual card, it talks about why Decipher banned it and what we did to unban it. So I think that's the sort of thing that he's talking about. On the blog, I know that we had something that talked about that broke it down culture by culture, but I don't know that it broke down each individual card. But I think there's something.
you did sort of previews of a bunch of different ones by each culture, but you didn't do all the whole set.
Yeah, but I mean, we could throw something like that in here. That's something
It's
that
just
can
a
be
lot
done.
of work, isn't it?
Yeah. And hey, maybe we could just do a video at some point, me and you, and whoever else wants to show up. We could just go over the design ideas of each card, and maybe we don't necessarily have to type it all out. Maybe we could do that at some point. I love it, and I wish more players liked them too. Yeah, a V1 for 2 towers. Well, let me tell you, we're not calling it V1 though. That name's taken.
I call it V1,
yeah. Okay, love the idea and the concept, but can we get art instead of movie stills for future sets so we could do a print-on-demand service? Okay, so this guy goes into basically wanting to be able to print the cards legitimately, and we're never going to do that, I'm afraid. Even at cost, especially especially anything that brings money into it, that's just, no, not doing it.
And art and movie stills is not the only thing that's copyrighted here, so
yeah, exactly.
Like half the problem.
Yeah, like we have we've upscaled the templates, but they're still Decipher's templates, right? So yeah.
I mean, yeah, even going, full image, full art. I mean, you're still using the strength icon and the vitality icon. Like you'd have to redo everything from the ground up.
It would basically have to be like the set 40. Sorry, not set 40. It was second edition. That went through and actually did recreate the art from the ground up. It looked different, but that is basically what we would have to do if we were to ever even have a hope of doing that. And frankly, we have enough time. We have enough difficulty putting together the Masterworks, so I don't anticipate that happening. Too large for a box like this. I've never stinted on offering them a Discord, though. I bet this has ceased to hope. And he and Phelan Cassidy, even though they have both declined to join the council themselves, they have been absolutely instrumental in making any of the cards that we have put together, whether they are errata or virtual cards. They have been crucial to making sure that those cards weren't dumb. Every time that we posted something and then they were like, actually, this is just X card, with more strength, we'd all facepalm and go, dang, how did we miss that?
I always dread their posts on my because I put up these cards that I think are really good, and then they just go, this name's already used in this set, and this card is just this, and this is broken with this. It's very helpful. I need them, but it's painful.
Better that we have it than to release it and discover that in Gemp. But yeah. I love that guys are doing this. Can't wait to see more. The card design and fit with the meta is fantastic. There are a few cards that I feel are still underpowered. Yeah, once again, we definitely talked about that. It's not perfect, but at the end of the day, it's simply exciting to be playing with new cards, particularly those that were meant to push an underused strategy into viability. Personally, I'd be happy to see future sets of the same sort. I think the challenge is that people are less accepting of new cards than they are of errata. It seems like set 1 was not explored very fully by players on Gemp, and the problem might compound if more sets are added. I could imagine virtual cards being used to add variety to some of the leagues on Gemp, even sealed leagues, even if the PC including virtual cards format doesn't see wide use in casual play. And so that is actually one of the things that the Sealed Gala is doing differently. The Sealed Gala is purely, almost purely Decipher cards. It actually doesn't include, or maybe there were some of them that specifically included virtual cards. But part of that is down to the fact that we don't have packs created yet, which there are a few different ways we could do that. We could just straight up make a V1 booster pack and assign rarities to each of them. We could make a Fellowship block pack that pulls from all 3 sets and also just happens to include V1 as part of the randomization. There's a few different ways that we could do it.
I mean, we did give rarities because I remember the reason we did rarities in the first place was because Morvale wanted them to be available for draft on LotR.
Yeah, and so we did throw those on there. That was before our first rework, and so I
some
feel
of
like
them have changed since then.
yeah. So we would definitely at the very least have to look at them again. And another thing too to consider is that like they don't have to be since they're not distributed by themselves. If if half of them ended up as rare cards, that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. So we do have to remember that it's purely for draft and sealed, and so it only has to look at the power of the card and not at how would we distribute this in a physical format. So, but yeah, definitely something to try to consider and figure out for that. Let's see. This is an excellent start, and I look forward to seeing how the game evolves and grows. Seeing Fellowship block starts that aren't always Heir to the White City warms my heart. Yep.
Hallelujah.
Thank you for the transparency and efforts to balance them. I think we clearly. Oh, this is actually my feedback. I think we clearly stuffed it a bit with cards to meet various arbitrary quotas. We already talked about that. I just don't feel like testing new stuff right now, but I'm interested to play once it's ready. Boy, not only was it officially released in August, but it has been on Gemp since January. It's ready. Go play it. You should make more. Don't mind if I do. All right, so
Really
now
quickly on that note, before we move on regarding kind of the overall feel, and feedback from V1, I'd be curious. Like I've played a fair number of VSet1 games, mostly with my other friend who's a big proponent of the set. And there will be evenings where I'll throw up a game and nobody comes in and to pick it up, right? There's very few adopters, I guess, so far of the format. And recently I haven't been putting up any games or anything, but I'd be curious if we, I don't know, publicized it more videos, more streams, more, like, hey, go put it up in the Facebook group, go check out this most recent game, between Kentura and I, or whatnot, like, and just get it out there more, for
Yeah, I
people to
do.
see
I
that,
do
hey,
feel
this
like we
is.
didn't push it
Yeah,
much.
like we haven't publicized it enough. Like, I mean, people are if they're scared to play a game, if they're scared to even try it, maybe they'll sit there and they'll spectate it. Maybe they'll watch it. I mean, I've definitely seen some people pop in and take a look at the game, but whether they come in and we're already on site 7, or like they haven't seen how the game really plays out and how effective, or the SAM rework was, or like, oh man, that would make corruption actually a thing, and like they just haven't given it a chance, and so maybe just some more videos, some more recordings, maybe that'd help in the long term.
I think that helps, and I think that also hitting the errata also that's also something that makes people excited too to play. The peak that we had was that with movie, as you can see, that in way back when we released a big batch of errata and V1 into public playtesting, we had hundreds of games here. We managed to get 4.3% of all games played were the movie block PC. And so we have definitely lost some momentum. Part of it was the fact that we didn't do anything for a few months this year, and so we had to basically go back from scratch. But yeah, so Fellowship Block has overtaken the other two as the most commonly played PC version, and this has actually improved quite a bit over the last few months. If we hop back to August, we can see that this is down here in the 0.9% range. So we've definitely improved a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But this is I think that this is a reflection of people actually responding to the fact of when we're active. On other games, Dota 2 is the one that I always look to because I was very active in the community with that for several years. But it's an exciting day when patch day drops, when there's a big old set of card changes to look at, and to get excited over. Sometimes you see that, oh yes, that thing that has been dominating the meta has now finally been laid low. But more than that, look at these like 10 heroes that just totally got buffed. That's awesome. That makes all those thoughts go through your head. Well, is it viable now? Could I actually do
Right.
that? How does it work with this other stuff? What is this new thing that is alongside these changed old things? It just completely knocks everything over, and in the chaos, people have to try and figure out how to play the game again, and that's it's engaging. Every time that we have released stuff, it results in a bit of a spike of people trying to see, oh, is it different now? How does it work? And we basically just, I think, have to keep that up. And well, I guess that's a decent segue here from V1 over to Errata. So same question. The Players Council has issued Errata. First altering all cards that Decipher ever X-listed, and later addressing some but not all of the well-known abusive cards in various formats. How would you rate our errata efforts? Now, I noticed that our rating for the errata is a lot higher than for the V1 set, which was surprising to me because I feel like the verbal feedback we've gotten up to this point has been in reverse, where there are people that are excited to see new cards but don't want to see us touch any of the old ones. So that was definitely interesting to me. In particular, the fact that a 10 out of 10 is the second highest rating that people gave it, the second biggest bucket of responses, is very interesting to me. And so, in general, I tried to get people's thoughts. This is a mess. Most people wanted to give their thoughts that really should have gone down in here. But in general, people seem to think that the errata are cleverly and well done. Like, that's 2/3 of all people think that the errata did well. So, release errata and paper slips as well. Wish granted. Let's see. I think some of the erratas work fine and are closer to my own ideas of how those erratas should be, but some others I think didn't fit well, which is fair. Especially there were especially some times where I was just trying to make an errata go through, and people didn't always agree with me, and I ended up doing it anyway. But then it ended up getting undone, and we definitely need a better system, a better process for this. If I did nothing else, if I only did errata, then I think what I would want to do is I would, about every month or so, I would try to release a batch of 5 to 10 errata. Sometimes addressing the worst of the worst, sometimes just issuing buffs, but just kind of have a trickle like that of regular changes, while also trying to do something like once a year or something. We have a big blowout where there's 100 cards that are all changed. Some buffs, some nerfs, some side grades, some whatever. Just something to shift things around. But I mean, obviously, we just don't have the manpower for that at the moment, and we do need more people to consider what to change and how to change it. And actually, there will be some other questions about how to handle errata in the future, so we'll definitely be revisiting this here in a second. More cards need errata, like the Nazgul that gets +1 strength for each shadow possession, or promise keeping again, and deceit and scouring and relentless work. So those 3 have already been errated. And in fact, I'm not totally convinced at this point that they need to be continually errated, but maybe I'm wrong. Relentless Work is actually it doesn't need an errata, it needs a bug fix, is really what it needs. It has a bug where, well, it doesn't really matter, but it's more powerful than it would be otherwise. And then the Nazgul that gets +1 strength, I have seen that recently, the Ilari Lamenya from set 19, I think, that is +1 strength per shadow possession in your discard pile, and then if you are playing one of Sergeant Drano's giant 200 card decks, you discard half your deck, and now he is literally strength 50. Yeah, no good. I think it's a good shakeup to the meta. Fantastic job. I agree with most of them. Part of me wishes that some of the errata were format specific. Galadriel, Lady of Light, comes to mind as a card that is completely fine as is in Fellowship block and only needs to be changed after the site path changes in set 11. I understand the reasoning, however, around keeping a card consistent across all formats is really the only way to go with errata. So I definitely agree with that, just from a consistency standpoint, that if we're going to have the PC version of a card, we should really just have the PC version of a card instead of multiple versions. That said, one of the things that I want to get around to doing here in the near future is a further revamp of how cards are defined that makes it very, very easy to add errata versions. Actually, in my head, one of the things that I want to be able to do is go in and add all of the versions of a card that has ever existed. So, for instance, Mirror of Galadriel has 4 different versions at this point. The original version that was created, 2 different printed erratas by Decipher that tried and failed to address the card, and then our own version, our own errata of the card. I would like to have all 4 of those in Gemp. I would like people to be able to say when they are defining a format or when they are putting together a table that actually we are playing the print version of Decipher from the very day that it was released, with no errata that comes after that. I want people to be able to do that. And so by having a system that is going to enable errata like that, I mean, I still think that, from an ideological standpoint, it makes more sense for the PC to only have one version, but I mean, I won't say never to this. I mean, potentially it could be something that we end up doing once it is actually easy for us to define an errata, unlike now. I like how the errata also tries to improve the useless cards. I hope you do more of this. Me too. it seems really dumb to me to have a format with 500 cards in them. But actually, we're lying to you. There's only 100 cards, and the rest of them are newbie traps. I would like to change that. I wish this was played more than non-PC. Yeah, me too. We'll get there eventually, I hope. But it'll take some time. The Star Wars PC, for instance, is almost not quite exclusively the PC versions, as opposed to Decipher only, but the vast majority, I think 3/4 or more of their games are PC games. So I think we'll get there someday. I appreciate the attempt. I'm not sure how I feel about the execution. It might just be that I play the game based on nostalgia and I accept the imbalance that comes with fodder. Yeah, well, I don't know how to serve that. We've already served that. You're able to continue playing the old version if you want. So that's just, I guess it's just not for you, and that's okay. Let's see. They hit all my favorite cards. Well, you're the worst player. Just saying. Let's see. I think I love or at least accept every single errata except for the one for a talent for not being seen, and that one was a bit off the wall. But it was kind of an example of the difficulty of changing some of these cards. And Decipher themselves were actually talking about this in an interview that they gave, which is what all this big text here is, where they talk about that there's no levers on this. It costs 0, so they can't. I guess they could have added a little bit to that. But to play Exert a Hobbit, like, do you exert twice now? Each time the Fellowship moves about 2 Hobbit companions to make the shadow number -1. If we're going to nerf that, how do you make -1 worse? Like, there's not much room for you to be able to move it. And so we did it just by splitting it up into 2 cards, basically, that you have to have 2 cards instead of 1 to have the same effect. Which, that's as far I think as you could get while preserving the original usage. If you wanted to go any further, it would involve a rework that does not involve choke, I think, because there's just not much work, not much to be done. You guys must really hate Corsairs. Yeah, that's my fault. On the other hand, it should have been enough to make Raider Halberd Southron only, and that is something that I have dug my heels on. So what they're referring to here is the fact that Castamere of Umbar combined with Castamere up here, and then let me get the Raider Halberd. So the issue is that Castamere here, being enduring, combined with the Raider Halberd that is able to exert himself to add 2, so he can immediately exert himself 3 times to get himself up to 20-something strength or something ridiculous. And so everyone always says, oh yeah, just go in and change Raider Halberd and make it so that instead of a Raider man, it is only an Easterling. And I don't like that philosophy of saying that, well, the only way to balance this sort of thing is to make it so that the subcultures aren't involved with each other. What is the point of having a Raider culture if the Raider cards cannot work with each other? It seems to me that if we're going to go that direction, we may as well try to split up Raider into 3 separate cultures. Which, you could make that argument, but I feel like if you want to go that direction, you have to go all the way. I feel like we can't call ourselves designers if something this simple is able to defeat us. Surely Castamere ought to be able to have the Raider Halberd played on him and it not completely bust up the game. And that's a Castamere problem, not a Raider problem. Or not a Halberd problem. But, I'm willing to continue to discuss and argue over that. I have been overruled in the past. It happens, so. Errata can always be redone, and this is one of the things that I always like to point out, that, we can always walk them back if need be, and we have done it a few times already. The red line on regular Decipher cards without real errata is confusing. So, what he's referring to here is that a little while back I went in and made it so that all of these so-called clarifications that Decipher issued also received the errata red line. And the reason for that is because what Decipher called a clarification, so it was still a card change, right? If it was unintended, if it was not something that they had anticipated and they didn't see it coming, they called it an errata. However, if they made a typo or if they wrote it down wrong and we were supposed to have read their mind as far as what they meant, they called it a clarification. They were both errata. Don't be confused by that. They just decided to not call them errata because they really didn't like the idea of errata. This was one of the first games where they had errata. in Star Wars, they preferred to just release silver bullets. They did not like the idea of drawing a card from your booster pack and then being told, actually, the text is different. And so they tried as much as they could to reduce errata, even though they did it quite a bit. However, the point about it being confusing is well taken. In particular, I want to be able to differentiate PC and Decipher errata a little better. Maybe use a yellow slash or something instead of a red one. As long as there are playtesters involved, PC errata is the right direction. So, if you are listening to this video, please, please, please come join up. This is one of the things that we are missing quite a bit. We do not have an official playtesting group. That may sound confusing or surprising to you, but we just simply don't have a whole lot of people on the PC that are doing that. We need it. I absolutely agree, but we have like maybe 5-6 people, and most of us are dedicated to various technical tasks. So if this is something that you agree with and this is something that you think that you could do, we would like you to come join us. Come help us out. Perhaps somewhat too far. Corsairs, yes, yeah. I generally feel that the introduction of new cards to address an abusive problem is better than errata to existing cards, but I think the community as a whole prefers it, and I've seen some good development from it. And there's no card that you will introduce that will make Dwarf Guard good, right? Sometimes you just have to issue a buff. Likewise, when there's a card that is awful, I really don't like the idea that the solution is to introduce a new card, because then that means that instead of a 60 card deck, I really have a 58 card deck because I have to include those other cards, and that choice is taken away from me. As a solution, I don't think that it actually solves anything. It just introduces a new batch of issues. But yeah. Part
I
of me
agree with you there.
Yeah. Part of me still rejects unofficial stuff, but I hope it will change with time. Messing with existing cards is fishy for me. Yeah, see, this is the sort of feedback that we were receiving before, which surprises me about the total aggregate, but I guess that's just the silent majority or whatever. Would prefer if they were more popular or available for games as often as traditional. Yeah, well, we're working on that. You guys are great. Love the errata. They were necessary, even if a couple of strategies of mine are less strong, but I repeat, they were necessary for a more balanced gameplay. And actually, one of the things that I've noticed is how with the PC formats that movie block is the least popular of the three. Expanded is up there with Fellowship, and I think the reason for that is because Expanded had more of its major issues addressed. Erkenbrand's Horn is now much worse than it was. We've spot checked a few of those other major power cards. There's still quite a few left. They talked about that in Lamenia. They talked about there's still lots and lots of things that need to be done, but more pertinent cards have been addressed in Expanded than have been addressed in Movie. Even though we have touched things like Kirdan and Lady Galadriel, Lady Redeemed, and Grand, there are still a lot of actual tentpole cards that are, for instance, keeping elves at the top, and so we need to hit more. Honestly, we need to be swinging that nerf bat at more kneecaps. Some of the errata go too far, like Flaming Brand makes a Nazgul deck OP. I would actually push back on that, and I think that that is one of the major things we did right. Yeah, Nazgul decks are back, but they used to be absolute garbage. So I feel like that was a good. It's a good thing that you are seeing Nazgul decks now, and that they are hard to deal with. They were dumpstered before. Decipher already did a decent job of providing counters to most cards. Horn of Boromir is another example. Such a little thing is already an effective counter that the PC errata goes a bit too far. So this concept, this answer has always annoyed me. You're getting beat by Horn of Boromir? Well, the solution is that you're playing the wrong culture. Go play Moria and play such a little thing. That doesn't help me if I'm playing Uruk-hai and having a hard time with this. Some of these can be splashed, but most of them not always. And I just don't like that answer, that you are playing the wrong culture if you have this problem.
Well, I think the other thing that somewhat highlights is, maybe a lack of answers in the various cultures across, things that we've talked about as well.
Yeah, that is very, very true. And this is something that we have discussed in the past for burdens and condition removal and stuff like that. No, not every culture has access to all the tools, which means that the only cultures that you're allowed to play are the ones that actually have all the tools. And
it's especially apparent in Fellowship block where, there are less answers than there is, say, in movie block, as the cultures have been more defined and whatnot.
Yep.
So
I
mean,
think
it's still a problem across the board, but very apparent in Fellowship block. I on your note about the flaming brand, I'm probably right in the middle. I mean, I do like the change in the. I like the fact that you have to discard it to make use. However, I would say that Nazgul do have felt a little too strong so far in my testing, but that's neither here nor there. But like I said, smack dab in the middle of what you were saying in regards.
And I think part of it too is that I mean, we did introduce cards in V1 that definitely made Twilight Nazgul more appealing. I don't know if you're just talking about regular beatdown
No,
Nazgul.
it would be fierce beat down Nazgul. The problem is that they come out strong at sites 2 and 3 when fellowships are the least set up.
Yeah.
That's when they hit you hard. If you are trying to double move to 3, which I mean, obviously you can adjust your play style, but if you don't know you're up against Nazgul, for example, and you go to site 2 and you get hit by a fierce Witch King, you used to have some stopgap, maybe like a flaming brand would save you, right? Like you could play that early on. Not that that's the only change, but yeah, it feels like they hit you hard and fast, and some of the tools that you had before that kind of maybe save you have been dialed back a little bit. There's less choke, there's less interaction with the Nazgul in general. So
yeah, and it's
that's a
it's a
funny
tricky problem
example.
because sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the Witch King with a sword at site 2. That's you can never do anything about that, right?
Yeah, and it's a tricky
You're
problem
kind of
because
lucky you've drawn the flaming brand.
yeah,
right.
but by the time you get to site 5 or so, Nazgul would just have nothing, and so it's kind of a once you have that set up Boromir or Aragorn or whatever, they will just completely destroy every Nazgul that you send forward. And so I mean, maybe it has gone too much in the direction of making Nazgul too overpowered. But to me, that says that we need to introduce some more anti-Nazgul stuff, not necessarily buffing up Flaming Brand. That there ought to be more things. Like for instance, I've heard that Not Feared in Sunlight is a great answer, and when it comes up, it absolutely will ruin your day as a Nazgul player, but people don't play it. People are used to just saying, well, why can't I just throw in my single flaming brand and win the day? Well, sorry, you're going to have to look at some other answers. But yeah, we need to.
I think on the Nazgul, maybe more people are playing Nazgul now. So you're seeing more of the site 2 losses, site 3 losses.
That's definitely part of it too. Is people are looking at the new V1 stuff and they're like, oh yeah, let's see if we can make these Twilight Nazgul work, or and it kind of leads into, well, I kind of liked that. It worked pretty well. What about the other Nazgul stuff now that Flaming Brand is less effective?
I guess the point I bring up with this is I think there were a number of changes that were made for various reasons, and that it was all to a net benefit of the Nazgul. You have Sam, you have Choke, you have Flaming Brand. It's just, so like it got it in my playtesting with it. It got to a point. It's like, well, are you running the Arwen? Are you running the Uncommon Legolas? You're gonna die to a Nazgul bomb, or if you may sneak past, right? But you're going to be losing a companion to something, So there's a strength check, a gate check there at the beginning when Nazgul can get out more reliably because you're not choking them out. That was the way fellowships seem to survive early on as they're getting set up. Is there's just no Twilight being put out, but a lot of things now cost more Twilight overall. Even that one additional Twilight. How many times have you gone to play your Shadow and like, man, if I just had one more Twilight, I could have got the Witch King out, right? This one Twilight makes a huge difference in this game. So the frying pan costing one, it's a big difference. So
yeah, and I'm totally down for addressing this and seeing what we need to do now for Nazgul. Are there nerfs that we should give them? Are there additional cards we need to release? Are there anti-Nazgul tech that we need to buff besides Flaming Brand? Like, are there additional things that we can do around it?
I mean, and it's all just a feeling, and I mean, until we have concrete data, I mean, it's really hard to move on any of this. And so that's
Yeah.
we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place here. It's like people can complain about, they went out and played 5 games and lost 4 of them to Nazgul, but that could have just been, a coincidence, right? Like until
Yeah.
we see that, Nazgul are winning 67% of their games against the field, regardless of what you play. They have no bad matchups or whatever. Like it's hard to do something.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's where we need the play testers and we need the data.
Yeah.
One or both.
Good work. Lots of compliments coming in. I like the attempt at most of the execution on cards that were banned. I don't like messing with cards that were not banned. So in that case, if there's a lot of people that are with this mindset, I feel like it's just going to get worse as time goes on. I'm sorry, there were only so many banned cards to affect, but a lot of that too was Decipher just stopped having much of an impact near the end. They released cards and didn't do much else. They did have those errata that they slapped out at the very end to try and spot balance it, but like, I mean, Decipher slowly died. They died a slow and painful death. So I feel like this is not a good litmus test of whether or not a card is overpowered, because they weren't around to effectively ban things at the time. Let's see. I think Grand or the Troll Besieger not been errated good enough. The rest were great edits. Grand, I think. So the edit that we ended up doing. Okay, so basically we changed almost nothing except that if you affect a non-support area card, then Grand self-discards. So it was a relatively small change, but it makes it so that you can't just take out any zero-cost card with impunity, and you can't just snipe Anduril or whatever and have fun with it. Like, at least it has to be a little thematic that it's for support area cards only. But I guess I mean, if you see someone running multiple copies of Ground, I can see how that would seem underpowered. And then the other one, the Troll Besieger, I think he's referring here to the Great Hill Troll. And so this is on its second iteration, because I did walk back what we ended up doing. So now it's a limit -5 on the Great Hill Trolls discount, and you now have to discard an engine if you want to get that free, the Free People's Condition discard. So let's see. Not been errated good enough. Are you saying that it was too hard or not hard enough? I'm not sure. Also, welcome to Throxor. I see you signed in, and it looks like Finarfin took off. So yeah, we're having people come in and out. Once again, just feel free to speak up, Throxor, if you have opinions of what we're talking about here. Eradicating bad cards to buff them is a false positive. Better to make new cards and just leave the weak cards behind. Some may find their day in the sun when a mechanic or theme gets revisited in a new V set. I do not agree. There are way too many cards, way too many bad cards, way too many cards that are middling that never ever get touched. There are some concepts, like for instance, this mentality works for something like Tentacles. All you needed to do to fix Tentacles was release that set 19 Watch on the Water, right? And now in Expanded, Tentacle decks are a thing that you see. So in situations like that, where there is a mechanic or a subset of cards that are all named that can then all be have an effect that improves them all, you very well can just release a new card to make them all powerful. However, I don't think that that's going to be the case for purely underpowered cards. Like, let's look at Weight of a Legacy. It's an attachable condition. If you were to have something that said, well, you may wound a character that has a Sauron condition attached to them, you're still not ever going to play Weight of a Legacy. You're going to play Thin and Stretched, and you're going to play Desperate Defense of the Ring, and you're going to play those other attachable conditions that are also good in their own right. This is not a mentality that will ever actually address those weakened cards, because the reason you don't play those cards is because there are better alternatives even in their same weight class. So yeah, we'll just have to agree to disagree on that one. Like I said, 99% of instances, it's better to just ban, especially when a PCV2 card could be a new card with the errata you were going to use. And see, this just seems wasteful to me. We have these cards, these concepts, especially when a card is trying to capture a particular thematic concept, it seems wasteful to me to release a slightly different version of that card, and play musical chairs with names and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm not convinced. In general, so sorry, was that? Oh,
Oh yeah, just thinking of the last two comments. I mean, I feel if you've got a card, it should be used. So if you errata it, that's better than making a completely new card which has the same game text. So
yeah.
I do agree with you on that, on those two comments.
In general, the errata have been a good balance of making OP cards still playable but not abusive. I like the improvement errata and think there could be more. I totally agree. In terms of fixing this game's flaws, I think errata are the method that will be most acceptable to people. I agree with a lot of the errata choices, and I think there are more cards that need errata. I don't think errata should happen. We don't do them frequently enough. Keep it coming. With a huge card pool, errating cards from time to time is crucial. Yes, I totally agree. I'd do it monthly if I had the bandwidth myself. What are your thoughts on the 3 PC formats? So most of these thoughts, I've already been through them. Feel free to come through and take a look at them. They are, for the most part, just repeats of what we've heard. Fellowship has seen an increased usage of Nazgul. Not sure if they're overpowered. I think the meta is just used to getting used to dealing with Nazgul again, and I think that's where I lean on the question. But yeah, I don't think that there's anything necessarily new in this section, so we'll skip over it for now. Gemp has been updated quite a bit over the last year. What new features did you enjoy? I'll admit that this question was almost entirely just to draw attention to stuff if people have not been paying attention or haven't been on the communities and seeing the posts and so forth. And, there were some people that hadn't heard of any of them, and I'm sure that there were some people that hadn't heard of one part or another or didn't realize it existed. The new wiki will eventually replace the old wiki. What are your thoughts on this? So this is one question that has definitely evolved over time. For a long time, this was the forerunner. I prefer the old wiki. I won't be happy when it's gone, but that has, I think, rather fortunately, been overtaken by I prefer the new wiki, and I'm looking forward to have it at the new URL. But then, of course, they were both completely smoked by half of all responses saying that they had no idea that there were 2 wikis. Even though the old wiki has a big old banner at the top saying this is now an old wiki, please use the other new wiki over here, and the fact that we link the new wiki at the top of the of Gemp itself, and the fact that every time someone asks a question on Facebook, I hit them with a link to the new wiki, it still hasn't made a difference. I think in the future I will be putting a link in the deck builder.
I think you can thank Google for that.
Yeah, that's true. If people are using Google to find stuff, yeah, that is very true. But that's why we have the old URL. I mean, I do eventually want to push things over. But I think over here, over the search bar, I'll put a link that says if you're looking for an advanced card search, use this one on the new wiki. Because we do, in fact, right over here, I'll point it out again, advanced card search. There's all sorts of stuff in here that you can do more powerfully than you can do in Gemp. And it's going to be a while until Gemp's card data is full to the point where I can just pull that stuff into Gemp itself. So yeah, it's coming. If there are things about the old wiki that you prefer, let me know, because this will happen eventually. This is not a question. This is a when thing. In general, how would you grade the PC's efforts over the last year or so? And I'm glad to see that people approve of us more than they don't. In fact, I almost want to hear what that guy's justification of that is, that we did a 1 out of 10 effort, but whatever. Lots of thoughts in here saying thank you. Lots of, for the most part, even people that have, critique, but they tend to put it together as saying, well, you've got things to improve on, but I do appreciate what you do. So I would recommend to all the PC members to go in and read this. It gives you nice warm fuzzies. And now for the future stuff. So back to the question of errata in general, our philosophies on errata. So the question here is, errata is but one tool in the PC's toolbox, but there's many ways it might be used. Check any that you would support. So most of the questions in the past were, of course, in the previous section were about what we have done to specific errata in the past and what people have thought about it. But this is really kind of trying to gauge people's philosophies. So for instance, this one appears, errata anything that dominates its meta too easily versus errating anything that makes the meta stale. Those are 2 different things. Errata anything that results in a broken loop. I think most people are in agreement on that one. If you have something like, the Orkenbrand's Horn is a good example, when you combine Urkerbrand's Horn with the Shire Countryside and a few of the things, you can basically just filter out your entire Fellowship deck, and that's not great. Errata anything that has more than a 55% win rate. Errata anything that is never included in decks, i.e. has an inclusion rate of less than 5% with buffs. And so these have very specific numbers. The numbers are, could be adjusted, but that mentality of looking and seeing, does a particular card have more than a particular win rate? Does it deserve to be nerfed as a result? So I think in general, what we see here is that we have people that are in agreement that absolutely, obviously, broken stuff should be changed, and anything that dominates should be changed. That's about half of respondents say that. And then we have the repeated refrain here that about 40% said that anything that is not included should be buffed. But then there are an awful lot of people talking about basically different ways that they don't like the way that errata might be used. In particular, oh wait, never mind. That's in the next question. But so yeah, I didn't really get a whole lot more information out of this than what we already knew, but that's okay. Next question. Our goal was to avoid too many errata until we had the proper numeric analysis that would allow us to make at least partially objective decisions. However, progress on this has been slow. What are your thoughts on this? So the answers that I included were the PC should wait to do any more errata until you can properly analyze replays. The PC should keep working on the replay analysis, but in the meantime, it's fine to do errata until the deck catches up. I'm surprised to see that more people answered this one than that one, but hey, it is what it is. The PC shouldn't bother with analysis at all and just develop errata the old-fashioned way. Some people thought that, but yeah, most people didn't. The PC should let the community vote on what cards to errata. And errata stinks. The PC shouldn't do it at all. Yeah, well, there's some people that say that, but I'm sorry. We just wanted to know how many of you exist. We're not following that.
So on the data question, I probably have something I can at least share with you in terms of what frequency cards get played and kind of how they contribute to the win rate. I'm a bit skeptical of making too many decisions based on win rates because you play one card, but it could be that you're playing the Isengard faction, and it's the Isengard faction that's good, not that particular card. It's just commonly played in the Isengard faction. Like a Rework regular, for example. You're always going to stick some of them in.
Yep, and it's especially as I have put a lot of thought into how this might even possibly be interpreted if we had the data that I would like, and if we take a game like Hearthstone, it's a little bit easier to say that a particular card has impacted your win rate or not by its inclusion. In Lord of the Rings, we have the major problem of having these separate free peoples and shadow sides. If your shadow kills the enemy, then did that free peoples card that you included, did that actually impact your win rate or not? And that's tough. Like it's complex. And in fact, as I've thought about it, I'm thinking that we might just have to lean more towards having absolutely siloed comparisons where we don't look at a card like in general. We just say among companions, these companions are going to give you a higher win rate than these companions, or among minions, these minions help more than those minions do. But I don't know that we'll ever be able to get it to a point where we can absolutely say, yes, this has an objective influence factor of 9 versus an influence factor of 8 or whatever. However, I do think that we can still use these to help us sort the batch of cards to decide which ones to start addressing. At the moment, we have, since we got rid of all the X-listed cards or errated them into usefulness, we've basically been going off of what do people complain about, which is essentially calling for a vote, right? Like, what do people think? What cards should we address next? And that's not an objective process. I would like, at the very least, to be able to say that, okay, before we issued this errata, it had a magical influence number of 9, and then after we did the errata, it's now got an influence number of 7. And at least be able to try and pin down a trend of how often a card is included or whatnot, even though it's, I don't know if we could ever get an actual objective standard that would say, okay, this card absolutely needs to be addressed. But at least we could get something where we could sort things by and say, all right, these appear to be the movers and shakers. Now, as humans, can we look down and try to actually figure out, do these need addressed, or is this for some other reason? Like, for instance, if I see a particular copy of the One Ring being included, that is not necessarily a good or a bad thing. Like, the One Ring is going to be in every single deck, right? So, I mean, we're going to have to apply some common sense to interpreting whatever the data is. But I do think that we can at least use it to point us in a general correct direction. Even though, I'm not much of a numbers guy when it comes down to analyzing statistics or whatever. But anyway, however, I am encouraged a little bit by people saying that, well, maybe just do more of those gut feeling errata and just keep working on the data in the meantime, which I think that's probably a good direction for us to go. There were a lot of people in this particular question that wanted to say don't let the community vote, and I do think that there was a bit like I didn't word this properly. I was never suggesting that we put out a vote and say, all right, you vote for the next card to errata, because that could totally be gamed. What I would do instead is put out a poll of what cards do you think should be errated, and if people put in a card that I think is stupid, that doesn't have any bearing, or it's a meme or something, like Cardi McCardface needs to get errated, I'm sorry, like, we don't need to actually take that. I wouldn't put out a poll like that as a democratic process, right? It would purely be for informational, for us to give ourselves a starting point. I do not intend to blindly make decisions based on votes, like we're doing now. We are sitting here and looking at what we've got and incorporating it into what we're doing, but we're not just taking this to mean, oh yeah, that's the direction we need to go because that's what the community voted on. That's not what I'm about. Okay, so besides mere game balance changes, there's a lot of game system rework concepts that could be explored through the magic of Errata. So this is talking about some of the initiatives that I would like to address at some point. These are probably longer term than not, but it's also been nice to see people's responses here. So out of 97 responses, spring cleaning, making all cards from all eras use consistent language. So about 40% of people approved of that. So this includes cleaning up the last 3 sets. They have very inconsistent wording. One of the big ones I like to point at is the Erkenbrand's Horn wording differences. So we changed one thing here. We, like, from an actual mechanical standpoint, is that we changed it from exert bearer to play a follower to exert bearer to play a Rohan follower. All the rest of this, like, wording difference is purely because of the poor wording standards that were used in the last 3 sets. So we took out redundant statements like reshuffle your draw deck. The person that designed this, I'm almost certain, was used to designing for the Star Wars TCG, where you have to specify when things get reshuffled because you usually don't shuffle your reserve deck. And so, like, stuff like that, like, this is all just cleanup. So we would basically be taking this process towards those last 3 sets, and there's probably a decent number of hunters and so forth that would also take it. But yeah, that's basically what it would be trying to do. Although there's also some early stuff from Fellowship block that I think could also stand to be cleaned up to use later wording and verbiage. We started to do that for things like events that or conditions that specify support area in the type line instead of saying placed your support area in the game text. Little cleanup things like that that earlier sets didn't have. Negative play experience reworks. Take toxic concepts like choke or discard, find why players enjoy them, and rework the concept all at once to something less toxic yet equally appealing to their proponents. So, discard sucks to play against. Not because it's overpowered, but because it's boring. When you play up against someone that is, playing a discard deck, it is going to be super easy to beat them. There's just one thing you do. You run like a madman. And you completely abandon any plans that you might have had. It sucks that when that comes up, that is just how you do it. I don't enjoy it. And I have to be careful because choke and discard are things that personally offend me. But I think they personally offend me on a design standpoint. and not necessarily, oh, boo-hoo, I keep losing against these cards, which is why I'm trying to be objective and trying to, figure out some numbers that I can point to it and say, see, this actually sucks. It's not just me. But in general, though, I do think that we could stand to serve the game better by figuring out why people like these decks and then putting them into a form that doesn't suck to play against. Choke, for instance. If we had a bunch of cards that instead of saying put less Twilight in the pool so that your opponent can't play anything, what if it was something like you had a version of Aragorn that said, if there are fewer than 7 Twilight tokens in the pool when you move, Aragorn is Strength +4 and Defender +1 until the regret phase. Something that actually benefited you and made it easier for you to do your job, to counter the minions that are going to be played, instead of producing a game state where your opponent plays nothing or practically nothing and you win by default. Like, I feel like there's other ways to make Choke thematic and interesting for the people that enjoy it, rather than making it a game about sitting down and not playing your cards. I cannot stand the idea of choosing to play a card game and then not playing my cards. Like that's ludicrous. That's not why we're doing any of this.
Welcome to Control.
Yeah. I hate Control.
I'm a blue mage over here. I love Control. Counter this, counter that.
I've actually never played Magic the Gathering, but I'm sure, yes, I would be in the camp of not liking Control at all, from what I hear from it. Anyway, so there was less support for this than most of the ideas here. But I think in one form or another, it's going to end up happening, even if we end up releasing, even if it's just in the form of releasing cards that stomp on Choke or whatever. But anyway. Site rework. So this is one of my personal pet projects. Find a way to make all the site paths play well with each other. And this is actually something I've been thinking about recently after the Seal Gala started. Playing on multipath rocks. There are some nice things about having the you're essentially playing with a movie block pool, right? But you have far more variety in the site paths than the stupid king block sites. So this has really made me want to really start tinkering again with the various proposals that I put together, because I really think that something that goes even a little bit further than multipath, because I think that there are some weaknesses to multipath. In particular, I find it too restrictive to put yourself within one whole block. Like, why can't I just mix and match and make sure that I have a 1 through 9? But yeah. Combating power creep. Decide on a target power level and start issuing mass errata to drag down the power creep of later cards. So this is referring to, there was a great project I saw once that someone did for Hearthstone, where they sat down and they mathematically calculated the value of individual keywords within the game, just based on the mana cost of the card. And so the idea would be trying to come up with some big grand set of standards that stated that, okay, 1 point of strength is worth 1/4 Twilight, or 1 point of vitality is worth 2 Twilight, or whatever. And I mean, obviously we wouldn't just decide on this. We would try to sit down and analyze the cards that exist and try to figure out, based on the cards that exist, what is the actual Twilight value of each of these individual aspects of the card. And once we've pegged it at a certain level, that, okay, like, we can clearly see that cards from earlier in the game have more expensive, like those values are more expensive, and cards from expanded are much less expensive for the value that you get. Okay, well, in that case, now that we've figured out an objective standard, let's go ahead and start nerfing some of the later cards to bring them to an earlier power level. Obviously, not everybody agreed with this. In fact, it was the least approved of the various projects here, but that is what I was aiming for. And honestly, this is the sort of thing, though. This is kind of what the errata is in general: is finding those cards that are just stupidly undervalued and making them closer to being properly valued. It's just that this would be more of a general thing, more of a general initiative, as opposed to just trying to look for the ones that are most annoying. And then the Shadows Deconversion Project, the idea of taking the 11 plus Shadow cultures and converting them to use the old movie era cultures. I think eventually the point of this would be to make things more thematic, because I think that is one of the big issues with the crossover from set 10 to set 11, is that a lot of things became less thematic between the site path change and the shadows culture change, and some of the just some of the focuses in general, as you no longer had a story that was being told by a particular movie that was being translated into cards. And so basically this idea is basically to just try and make those later cards more palatable to an earlier audience. But maybe these ideas aren't great. Maybe they are. None of these had buy-in from more than half of the respondents, so I don't know. But it is interesting to see the difference in what is appealing to different people, and then lots and lots of opinions. Anyway, so Gemp itself is constantly improving. What would you like to see change about it? There's lots of ideas that I have of things that I want to do. So this is mostly just for me to be referencing later when I'm trying to prioritize what to do. The Tengwar translation is definitely something that's been in my mind, especially because I want to reverse engineer the Tengwar font and stick it into the card generator so that we can create Tengwar promos just like we have the other types. But I don't want to do that in a case where it's not a card that everybody knows, right? It already kind of sucks if someone plays a card that's less known, that you don't know quite as much about, but it's also in Tengwar. Now you got to go look it up on the wiki. That sucks. So I want to introduce alternate language real support, so you can mouse over the card and it'll morph it into the English version, so you can read it real quick. So we'll skip over that. There's lots of different things in here that are suggested. I don't think I saw. Sorry?
On that one, I know we're running out of time, but the undo option, I feel like that's Gemp's best feature compared to other platforms, is that you can't undo mistakes. You make a mistake, you've got to live with it. I know it's quite decisive there.
And I definitely agree with that in a strategic sense, that you shouldn't be able to undo a strategic issue. What sucks is when you were in the process of rearranging your hand and accidentally clicked on a card to play that you didn't mean to play, or it asked you to choose one of these cards and you clicked on the wrong one, or stupid things like that. Those are really bad, not only for the how bad it feels when you were betrayed by your mouse and not by your strategic thinking, but more than that, when you're trying to teach a new player, it really sucks that if they didn't understand how a card worked and they played it and then it turned out it did nothing because there weren't any valid targets on the table. As a teacher, I would like to be able to say, oh, let's just undo that real quick. It feels brutal when a brand new player that still hasn't even figured out how, put their feet beneath themselves yet can't just try things out and stumble their way forward.
Yeah, having been through that with myself and my friends, last year, it wasn't too bad. You just laugh it off, and yeah, some games are ruined, I guess, but everyone was in the same boat, so it didn't seem too bad.
Yeah, and I do think that it would at the very least it would be something that is if we do ever introduce undo, it'll be something that is toggleable. So you could, for instance, make a table that had undo enabled or disabled, depending on whether or not you wanted a more casual experience or a more competitive experience.
Good feature.
Yeah.
Well, and the notion of a more competitive experience, I mean, I'd be curious to know what is like the competitive ruling on something like that. I know when I sit down with my friends and I go up to a site 3 that says if I play an elf, I get to draw a card. I don't sit there and say that I'm activating it from I don't click on the site to do that. Yeah, so I could see, I play it from my hand. I just play it and I draw my card. And so I know like that's the one that's tripped up new players that I've played with the most, is like, oh, you have to click on the site because you're activating the sight's ability, not from your hand. And so like having the ability to undo that, would make sense to me. It's like, oh, kind of a pick it back up and replay it through the appropriate channel. I don't know what in Magic, right? Like I can tap my land and I can untap my land and kind of redecide things. I'd be curious to know like where the line is drawn on what is allowed, for an undo, I guess.
And I believe that there were actually tournament guidelines for that for Lord of the Rings. Typically, they were the one that I remember was specifically about how you didn't actually declare maneuver, archery. You just kind of jumped from shadow to assignment, and then if you had something, you would interrupt and you would say, "Oh yeah, I've got this." So I know that they've got some guidelines on that, and we could take a look and see if what Decipher officially declared. I would definitely draw the line anywhere where there is additional information revealed. Where if you reveal, like if you draw 2 cards or whatever, and you say, "Oh wait, never mind, I didn't want to do that."
Sure.
Like it's like clearly that crosses the line. But I definitely get your point though, where exactly is the difference between what is more of a casual, sure, whatever, I don't mind, versus a well, okay, this was clearly just a misclick as opposed to a like an actual mistake on the part of the player, if that makes sense. So what would you like to see the PC do in the coming year? So this is just in general, like all the kinds of stuff that we've talked about. What do people want to see? More cards from The Hobbit and maybe Rings of Power. Oh boy, what a decisive statement. There's definitely a bunch of untapped stuff in The Hobbit, even though the Hobbit draft game exists and is technically in Gemp. There's definitely loads of stuff that we can get from there, and I'm sure in future VSETs we'll be approaching that. As far as Rings of Power goes, I don't think that we will be touching it at the very least until after the entire show is done. It's very difficult to try and design cards for a story that has mysteries in it, where you don't know where it's going to go. Lord of the Rings is one thing where we all knew who all these characters were and where it's going, so it was possible for Decipher to make decisions about things before Two Towers and Return of the King had come out. But considering that this is brand new stuff that nobody knows anything about, we absolutely can't touch it until at least that point. And then, of course, there's the fact that half of everybody hates the Rings of Power with a blistering passion, and so we're definitely not going to do it while tempers are running so high. And then there's the whole aspect of not wanting Amazon to come, bring the hammer down on us either. So that's definitely a not this decade kind of thing. Release V cards on paper like Star Wars CCG, wish granted. Maybe add the return journey stuff on Gemp. We will not be coding that for them. If they want to come forward and say that they're going to put forward the effort, I will gladly support them with information on how Gemp works, show them the card creation process. But we've got enough of our own V cards. I'm not going to be spending the time to code and debug someone else's cards. V2, wish granted, it's coming. More consistent weekend leagues. Well, there was a gap there. I don't know if by consistent you mean what we're doing with them or not, but yeah, we're definitely going to try and keep these going as monthly as possible. Gemp UI improvements, new wiki improvements for sure. Lots more errata. Don't know enough about the PC to comment. Well, you commented anyway. Keep up the cool artwork cards. Maybe colors or something to see what format games are waiting in the hall. Well, there's lots of revamps that I want to do. In particular, so obviously everyone has noticed that the game hall has been revamped. In the future, what I will be doing is also going in and performing a similar revamp on the deck builder and then eventually into the card hall itself. The reason I'm doing this is not actually to do the visual changes. There happened to be visual changes that were done along the way, but the whole purpose that I was doing that for was to make it so that the code didn't suck. Marcinez has some very wonderful engineering background, and he did wonderfully with the actual game engine, but he was not a UI designer, and it showed. So I'm basically just reworking this to the point where I can go hire a CSS guru to come in and revamp it for us to look better. But this was literally just to make it so that it doesn't suck when you actually look at the code, because it used to be so much worse behind the scenes. So eventually, yes, Continue to bring Gemp into the modern age of applications. That's included in there. I'd like to see some monthly reports with stats like formats, players, game count, and such. Well, that's obviously it's included by default up here in the server info, but I would be more than happy to, if you can think of anything specific you'd like to see up here, I'd be more than happy to try and see if it can be included in that report. More new cards. Trust your judgment. Why, thank you. I will. But yeah, most of this is stuff we've already talked about. Make Gimli's pipe a skirmish special ability. Okay. I don't know how or why that would work, but his is the exert Gimli to add 1 to the number of pipes you can spot. All the other pipe abilities, I mean, I assume they're talking about giving him a different skirmish ability, but Crown Totura, King of Gondor. All right, I support that. Lots of people talking about Rings of Power content, actually, and like I said, that will not be happening for some time. And then anything else you'd like to say, and then this is mostly just people saying, good job. Okay, well, lots of things we want to do, lots of things we want to do better. I want to put out a recruitment drive here at some point. One of the things that didn't actually come up, one of the answers that someone said was that they wanted to know who was on the PC and how many of us there are. If you want to know, technically there's about 30 or 40 people on the PC, but I probably need to do a culling on that number. There's probably only half a dozen people that actually do anything, as well as a few people beyond that that actually do contribute to the conversation, and I do count that as doing something. So I guess I should increase the number to like 8 to 10. But there's fewer people than you might guess. A lot of the impact that we've been able to have is because we utilize technology to do things that one person can't do with themselves. So we definitely need more people, and I didn't go down to it, but there is a big old list of emails down here at the bottom that I will be emailing, seeing if you want to go ahead and join. There's lots of things that need done, lots of low-hanging fruit that remains unplucked just because there's only so many hours in the day. So if there's some one of these projects we've talked about, whether it's Errata or one of these initiatives or any of these aspects that really appeals to you, that you think that you could be the person to do work on, come join us. Like, we do not have any standards. We don't have any requirements that you have to jump through to join the PC. So just come do it. If there's something you think that you could contribute, we will gladly help support you. If it's any of these things we've talked about, or if it's a cool idea that's not, I mean, feel free to contact us and we can talk. Anyone have any last minute things they want to talk about before we wrap this up? This very long 2-hour, 2.25 hour broadcast.
Nothing from me.
Right on. Well, in that case, I think that's the end of this. I'll go ahead and stop the recording.